According to MarketWatch, 72% of Gen Z lives paycheck to paycheck, all while facing the most expensive housing market in US history. But despite having more credit card delinquencies than any generation, 42% of Gen Z actively go further into debt in pursuit of luxury experiences, with 32% already missing payments on their buy now pay later loans. Raising the question, will Gen Z's future be nothing more than a monthly subscription? While each generation has faced its own economic hardships, largely fueled by immense greed of a select few, the cultural advice has always remained the same. Work hard, save responsibly, and stability, often in the form of homeownership, would inevitably follow. But after decades of continually wringing the American consumer of every dollar they have, while outsourcing unprecedented amounts of jobs and allowing wages to stagnate, the cost of living crisis has pushed the nation's youth into doom spinning their way through an economic catastrophe that even the most disciplined saving can no longer overcome.
If you look back 30, 40, 50 years, the things that were considered luxury items back then are now kind of more mainstay for the things that are more accessible to people, whereas the things that were always considered essentials and that truly still are essentials have become out of reach, right? So luxury poverty is kind of this idea where people are living in a lot of ways in poverty or kind of on the verge of poverty, but they have all of the things that would suggest otherwise. Things like electronics and consumer goods and toys and gadgets, things that used to be out of reach, which no longer really are.
This is Nicole, a fellow YouTuber whose channel, according to Nicole, focuses on cultural trends, consumerism, and personal finance, where she explains how the unprecedented rise in essential prices, combined with social media and low-barrier financial products, has fueled this luxury poverty phenomenon.
Prior to social media, prior to our phones being what they are, you could really only compare what you had to the people that were in your immediate circle. So the kids you went to school with, or your neighbors, or your family friends. And of course, there are exceptions, but in a lot of cases, those people were going to be in a similar socioeconomic bracket as you and your family, because you were living in the same area and had access to the same resources. Now on social media, you get a much wider berth of the people you're seeing and what they have. And so for sure, there's this desire to try to keep up with people who are often leagues ahead of you from a financial perspective, or maybe they're not, maybe, but that's the idea that they're giving off, right? And you no longer look and go, hey, like my next door neighbors have this and that's what I want, and maybe that's reasonable, maybe it's not. Now you're looking at, in a lot of cases, influencers who are being given things for free or being paid to accept them. You're looking at celebrities, and there's been a very deliberate, I think, blurring of the line between celebrity and civilian, where social media has made everybody seem accessible.
And while this keeping up with the Joneses phenomenon is not a recent cultural trend, with the later half of the baby boom generation even getting the name Generation Jones to represent their hyper-consumerist mentality, the reality is that this constant comparison is now being driven by the complete collapse of traditional societal achievements. Take this 1949 video of a Detroit Union auto worker explaining how his family entered the middle class, for example. Bill begins by describing how his wife, Julia, spends every Saturday morning visiting the 5 local grocery stores to find the best possible deals, as feeding 6 mouths is an expensive responsibility. While Julia finishes her shopping, Bill goes through his checkbook, looking for any additional ways to stretch out his paycheck. And after scrimping and saving every single penny, they were finally able to put a down payment on a new home, costing $9,925. In other words, this video demonstrates how a single income could once provide for a family of 6 and purchase a home worth roughly $134,000 today. Today, 77% of American households with a dual income cannot afford the median price home. And compared to just a decade ago, Gen Z is not only facing a collapsing job market, but also paying 31% more for housing, 46% more for health insurance, more than twice as much for car insurance, and is projected to pay approximately $145,000 in rent by the time they turn 30. And while 30% of Gen Z have been able to own a home by the age of 25, higher than both Gen X and millennials, 78% required help from their parents to afford the down payment, the highest of any generation, where 50% of parents with adult children are now providing financial assistance, averaging $1,474 a month. But for the 52% of young adults between the ages of 18 and 29 who are still living with their parents, or for those who do not have access to unlimited parental capital and are watching the opportunity of a steady career and homeownership continuously slip out of reach, many begin to question why anyone would be incentivized to save when the cost of nearly every essential item is already beyond reach.
There's an element to which it's a valid point where, at the end of the day, if things like housing, education, in the US, healthcare, the things that we all need to get by, if those things are completely out of reach for you, the truth is that another 20 or 50 or $100 here and there is not going to move the needle. I do think that there's a certain aspect to which that mindset becomes self-sabotaging after a while, because it's generally not the extra 20 or 50 here and there. It's that happening over and over and over again. And obviously that does all add up. If it's truly just, hey, I want to have one more Stanley bottle, you do you. But a lot of the times it's that mentality slipping into every aspect of life where it's just this, it's just that. And obviously, that does add up to hundreds and thousands over the years. But yeah, I mean, I understand the defeatist mindset where it comes from, and there is a certain validity to it where if you genuinely don't think you're ever going to get the things you need in life, it seems pointless to try to sacrifice the things that are going to make you temporarily happy, right? Like we look at sacrifice as a means of getting somewhere. So, okay, well, if I, avoid buying this, this, and this, or if I skip this event, or if I, cook all my meals at home, or whatever it may be, I'm doing this for a purpose. I'm doing this to get myself ahead somewhere. And if that's the truth, then that's great. But if you're going to do all those things and still end up in the same spot, then why bother?
And while older generations continuously blame generational laziness, work ethic, and Starbucks as the only culprits behind one's inability to achieve societal milestones like home ownership, the reality is that this rise of luxury poverty did not begin with Gen Z or millennials. It emerged from a period of immense Cold War anxiety. Throughout the 1980s, a surge of research from psychologists and psychiatrists called for immediate intervention, warning that an entire generation was growing up with a profound sense of helplessness. The Department of Psychology at Harvard University stated, "This fear of nuclear annihilation fostered a sense of having no future, an anxiety that persisted into adulthood, influencing personal decisions like delaying marriage and creating a future generation." In England, the School of Humanities and Social Sciences described a similar trend, writing, "The threat of nuclear war involves an overwhelming threat to the individual's future, that he or she will have no future, that there is no point in planning for marriage, children, or career." And according to the Department of Psychology at Illinois, there is also cynicism, sadness, bitterness, and a sense of helplessness. And as this generational anxiety took root, it collided with an American economy entering one of the most turbulent periods in modern history, where rising inflation, disappearing manufacturing jobs, and stagnating wages forced households to rely on a new financial tool simply to maintain their standard of living: the credit card. The widespread American adoption of credit cards during the late 1970s and 80s emerged from a perfect storm of economic pressure, deregulation, and cultural engineering, reframing borrowing as an expression of personal freedom and upward mobility, rather than financial risk. With income stagnating and the cost of living rising, credit cards were now the preferred tool to fill the widening gap between what people earned and the standard of living that they were promised. By the mid-1980s, sophisticated advertising campaigns, airline reward programs, department store cards, and the normalization of debt as a lifestyle tool transformed credit from a financial safeguard and into a cultural expectation, embedding borrowed prosperity into the foundation of American consumer behavior. Or today, we are once again repeating the same exploitative strategy with buy now, pay later options.
With the buy now, pay later, they advertise it as though it's interest free, which is not always true. There's some disingenuousness there where it's like, it's interest free with certain terms, but 41% of people who take out those loans wind up getting hit with late fees because they miss a payment, and those late fees come out to about the same as credit card interest. So they're not really doing you a solid in any way. But more important than even the late fees or the interest payments is that people see a purchase being broken into 4 payments or 6 payments. They just see a smaller number and it doesn't register the same in their brain. So if instead of spending $400 today, you're only spending $100, you're going to spend $104 more times in the next few weeks, but your brain sees only $100 today. And it allows you to justify it, I think, even more so than a credit card does, because, you're not taking that whole balance at once. I think that easy access to credit, easy access to consumer credit and consumer debt is one of the ways that pushes luxury poverty forward, because if you can keep the masses satiated by letting them have all these small little wins, by letting them have access to these, small purchases, and when I say small, they're bigger purchases, but things that are not necessary, right? When you can let people have access to the things that they want and give them that instant gratification, they're less likely to fixate on the things that they really can't access, that they really need.
And while the consumer-facing branding frames BNPL as a budgeting solution, the merchant-facing reality demonstrates the magnitude in which these services are truly just selling behavioral manipulation. According to Klarna's merchant data, adopting the service leads to a 40% increase in average order value, a 40% increase in conversion, and a 46% higher purchase frequency than the average shopper. And because the business model relies heavily on late fees, repeat borrowing, and the rapid recycling of debt, BNPL thrives most when shoppers are financially strained, turning this luxury poverty trend into a revolving balance spread across multiple apps and scattered due dates. And while nearly half of Buy Now Pay Later users are already paying late fees on their loans, the National Retail Federation now projects a record $1 trillion in seasonal spending. Adobe estimates that $20.2 billion of that will be financed through BNPL alone, an 11% increase over the last year, with 67% of parents relying on the payment method just to afford the holidays. And as this broader economy drifts deeper into an everything bubble, this cycle of endless consumer debt is pushing the American workforce into one of the largest wealth transfers in modern American history.
I think we're definitely in a bubble of debt. And I think I talked about this in one of my videos. I don't have the answers for where this is headed, but what I see it as is people are increasingly accumulating larger and larger sums of consumer debt that they're never going to be able to pay off. Traditionally, when you have debt, hi buddy, traditionally when you have debt, if you can't repay that debt, your assets are seized. And we're now going into a few generations of people who have no assets to seize, which means that the governments are going to be writing off the debts, I suppose, or the creditors are going to be writing off the debts, and somebody's going to, the governments always bail out the big companies and the banks when that happens. They're certainly not going to take that loan, on their own. And I think that it's very likely that could lead us into another, depression situation where, the governments bail out the creditors, they bail out Visa, MasterCard, Klarna, whoever, and it puts us all in a bad situation. But when people don't have property and they don't have investments, they don't have assets that can be used to pay off their debt, where is that money going to come from? And I think that there's a certain aspect to which people who have no assets also recognize that they can spend unlimitedly and there's no consequences, because what are you going to do? You can't bleed a stone, right?
And to just further expand on what Nicole is saying, I think the unfortunate reality is that the societal framework in which we've been used to for the past 80 years, I truly don't believe that exists anymore. And I don't think that there's any way that we can get back to that. There isn't just going to be a reality where there's a single person's income that could provide for a family of 6, buy a home, have a car or 2, have a dog, be able to go on 2 vacations a year, have weekends off, work 40 hours a week. That isn't going to exist. I think the entire societal framework is moving in a different direction. And there's definitely a part of me that wants to just be pessimistic and say that it's going to be awful. But I think that it's important to always have hope in some regard. And I don't pull any hope from our leaders. I think our leaders are atrocious. And that's the reason why I don't necessarily believe that we can get back to that societal framework, because all we have are geriatric leaders that are, they want to argue over who's better or whatever, who can keep their eyes open longer. And the everyday person is struggling. They are hurting. And nobody talks about that. Nobody. And so I live this situation with our leaders, both in the corporate and the government side, of being disappointed but not surprised. I get my hope from people, from you, from the comments, from the random stranger I see on the side of the road, from the interactions I have in real life. That's where I get my hope from, because I do believe that if at some point we could come together, and that doesn't even mean all of us, but just a small group, and we found some sort of way to be able to rebuild in whatever trajectory we're going, I think that we have the opportunity to set a far healthier foundation for society to grow on. With that being said, I think that it's crucial that we begin to recognize what it is that we work for. Why do I feel like if I can't purchase these essential items, that the only way I can feel gratified, the only way I can feel satisfied, the only way I can treat myself is with a luxury item. And I'm not even just talking about like a Gucci bag. I think going out to a nice meal, that is luxurious. Going on trips and vacations and these experiences, I do think that they're important in life with balance. But I think that if you're in this, there's no hope for a better tomorrow, let me burn the candle on both ends today, I just think that that's a very dangerous reality. Look at what happened with baby boomers. It makes total sense why they would believe a tomorrow doesn't exist. And yet it came. And now we're paying the prices of having a massive generation that never thought about tomorrow, that never thought about the next generation. And so I want to ensure that that doesn't become us. Give me a quick moment. I have to turn the light back on. And so for that, I think that we have to really do our best in finding what can we be thankful and grateful for right now. That even if I can't afford the essential items, and societally speaking, I'm really struggling, and I could go do a DoorDash order, or I could go get some sort of luxurious item, or I could go have a nice dinner, or I could go do some of those things. Are there ways that you could still be gratified doing something differently? To maybe remove the veil just slightly. This year is obviously coming to a close, and so I had my lease for my apartment go up or come to an end at the same time that I was kind of reflecting on this past year. So obviously the channel has grown substantially, and I'm so grateful for that. Financially speaking, it's been a good year, but I made the conscious decision to turn down about 6 figures worth of brand deals this year. And I did that because many of them I didn't use, I didn't feel aligned with them. I really couldn't stand that some of them alluded to that my audience was just a bunch of broke losers. And I'm not kidding. That was disgusting to me. And so I'm very specific in who I want to bring on, because not only do I have to worry about my reputation, my integrity, but I care about you. I mean, I don't want to put you in the crosshairs of a bad situation. That I think is insane. And so, there's mutual respect on both sides, and it isn't worth it to me to just have a little extra money in my pockets to do that. Now, with that being said, my apartment complex has unfortunately become, I don't want to say dangerous, but I mean, it isn't rare for a car to be stolen. It isn't rare for a car to be keyed. My car has been keyed. It isn't rare for, a certain smell to be coming from a lot of different people's apartments, a lot of litter on the ground, things like that. And a lot more things. I also live in a very small apartment. So for me, I go to sleep, I stare at my desk, I wake up, I stare at my desk, and I already only sleep for about 4 or 5 hours. So basically work is the only aspect of my entire life. And I had the goal of moving somewhere a little bit safer, a place where I could maybe have a little bit better of a work-life balance, and a place to where I could maybe have a little bit more room to where I could put my desk somewhere else, or have a second bedroom. Now, because as you can see kind of what's happened with the channel here recently, I ended up having to sign for another year. And, there's a lot of frustration in that. It's knowing that this place is only going to get worse, and I'm already burnt out and all of these things. And I understand that you might be thinking, you need to take care of yourself. You need to balance. You need to do all these things. I get that. But what I have found within myself is that while societally these things are frustrated, I don't need these things to feel good about myself. I don't need those luxurious items. I get so much fulfillment from the work that I do, from knowing that I had the luxury to say no to them. That to me is priceless. I am not willing to bankrupt my soul just to make extra money. And so what I've begun doing is going outside more, breaking away from the apartment, going to this local cafe that I like and doing work there. And being more creative has forced me to experience things in a different light. It has allowed me to be able to help people throughout my local community in ways I wouldn't have been able to do so before. And it makes me just realize how grateful I am. I get an immense amount of emails and comments from you all, and I'm so grateful that you guys are so transparent in what it is that you go through. And what you recognize is that every single one of us is going through some sort of challenge. And I think that if we just look at, man, just the fact that I can afford rent, that is a luxury. That is a luxury alone. Yeah, I probably won't be able to ever have a house, but at least I can have rent. I can have a little place that's my own. At least I can do this, right? I can go to the grocery store and I don't have to budget myself to oblivion. Like I can get the organic French onions every now and then. I think that if we start to look at luxury as peace of mind, as integrity and honor, and a way to be able to help out people, it's a great feeling knowing that I can talk to a waiter or something at the cafe and be able to give them a little bit larger of a tip. I'm able to do that because I didn't bankrupt myself for these societal luxuries. And I don't know if this is making sense, and I feel like I'm talking too much about myself, but I think it really is important that even in the darkest of times, you do look for some sort of glimmer of hope, some sort of light to be able to guide yourself out. And don't let that light be some sort of material good. Have it be your friend or your family or the person you're able to help at your job, or the fact that you're able to drive the car that you once wish you could have had, or the home you once wish you could have had, or the family, or all of these things. I think a lot of us are living lives that a decade or so ago, we would have done anything to be able to have. And if we just stop and we pause and we enjoy what we have now, I think it makes us have the time and the energy to pursue something different. And hopefully that's a closer community. With that being said, I obviously don't think that as a whole, society at large, America is going in a good direction. That's what my whole channel is based off of. But that doesn't mean that the communities within that can't be going in a better direction. So ultimately, I just kind of wanted to share that. I really hope this video was able to provide value to you. I did a full hour-long conversation with Nicole. That's available on my Patreon, so link is in the description. Her channel is also in the description, and if you don't mind, just checking to see if you are subscribed to the channel, if this video provides value to you. If you don't mind, just making sure that is taken care of. I truly do appreciate it. I hope that you're doing well, and I look forward to talking to you next time. Bye-bye.